Hey guys, Ricky Widmer here from Most Valuable Podcast. You're about to listen to a little bit of our primetime podcast that we recorded this week. Make sure to go to BlogTalkRadio / Most Valuable Podcast for our full-length podcast that you can go ahead and download. I hope you enjoy it. I know me and Brandon did recording it. And Brandon, we are now going to move into our final topic. And I'm glad that last week we mentioned how, Joe Mixon not invited to the NFL Combine. I said we were kind of pushing it off to the side. I'm glad we waited a week and didn't talk about that last week, because today, as I was kind of throwing together, I'm like, okay, I'm going to throw together topics, see what Brandon thinks. Usually if you don't like one, you throw me back with one that you do like, and we formulate what the show's going to be. But as I was looking for topics, I saw a Fox Sports article that said that Norman police released their video of their interview with the victim in the Joe Mixon case, which was Amelia Molitor, right? Did I say that right? I hope I said it right. Amelia Molitor. And really, it was very interesting. I'm going to leave that article in the description if you want to go and watch the video. It's graphic, so I'm going to give you the same warnings Fox Sports gives you in the article, but it's about a 58-minute video of the full interview with her and the detective. It was her two legal counsel, and her mother in there for the interview. And to me, it was interesting because overall, Brandon, after watching this interview, I think that this isn't going to help Joe Mixon, especially compounding that he's not going to be at the Combine.
I think that, number one, Ricky, I agree. I think that the number one thing was when he was one of two guys who were not invited to the Combine. That was telling. That was telling. When you are not invited to the Combine, do not come. That's kind of big for what isn't always necessarily huge, because what you do at the Combine necessarily doesn't make or break necessarily, but it's certainly nice to be there and be able to participate in some of the different things and be able to do as much as you can to be able to showcase yourself, because that's ultimately what it is. It's a showcase. But when you're not invited, that's huge. But I think the number two thing is also the fact that now we're getting to a point where it's one of those things where Miss Molitor, she is a little hazy from that night. She cannot completely remember everything, a little hazy, a little scattered. You and I both listened to I'll be honest, I did not listen to the whole thing. I have not listened to the whole thing yet. I have listened to bits and pieces of what she has talked about. I listened.
I filled you in on the important parts.
Yes,
too.
and I listened to the piece that she's talking about when the guys first came up to her. It was a group. It was not just Joe. It was a
group of guys.
It was a group of guys that came up, and a number of the guys were talking. And what I would say is, we've already talked about Joe Mixon. We've already talked about this situation. But if nothing else, there certainly would be a case to make that Joe Mixon may not hang out with the best group of guys. And he may need to find better characters to hang out with. And I think that would be probably the best way to be able to say that, because you know what, sometimes, and I'm not trying to necessarily defend the guy, because if he did something wrong, he did something wrong, okay? But I think that sometimes decent guys hang out with bad guys. And I think it's getting
bad crowd,
and it's getting away from them that helps them. It's not to say that you did some horrible thing, can't be saved, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean? And again, it's not to completely defend him, because I would come on here and say, if you treat a girl like that, if you treat another human being like that, that is wrong. You do not do that. But I think that he's got an opportunity now to distance himself from these people, from these guys, and try and do everything he can to show that he's a good guy. Some community service would help.
And the one thing I'm going to do is, I said that the link was down below, but in case you're one of those people where it's too long, didn't watch, here's the too long, didn't watch version. Basically, from the story that Molitor gives, is she's in the restaurant with her friends. There's two friends with her. They walk outside. She sees two guys that she had a class with the semester before, hadn't seen him in a while. She said she went down to talk to him. Then one of her friends, who she said has Crohn's disease, is like, I gotta go to the bathroom. She goes to the bathroom, and they're waiting outside. And that's when Joe Mixon and his buddies come out. And it was one of those things where it was like the typical stereotype that you get for jock guys, where the way that she described it was they were making jokes like, oh, dude, it's my buddy's birthday. It's my buddy, like cat calling her, oh, it's my buddy's birthday. You're going to help him out? You're going to help him out? Basically saying all these like sex acts. Oh, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And she was getting agitated by it. And the one thing that in her kind of explanation that didn't sit well with me is when she says one of Joe's friends, so one of the guys Joe was with, this wasn't Mixon himself, said something like, oh, how about you hit Joe and I'll hit your gay friend here. And they were obviously attacking the friend that she was with, where, and I'm telling you right now, there's going to be an expletive here, but in that she said, it was said to her like, oh, what, you're not gonna help me out, but you're gonna go home with this fag. And that, like, if that whole thing is what really happened, and I hope it is what happened, because obviously you'd never want somebody to lie, but I hear that and I go, so you guys were just being assholes? You were being assholes to her, and then everything else happened, and then she says, oh, she went in, and the last thing she remembers is saying something to the group she knew in the restaurant, and she turns, remembers a flash of Joe, and then bam. She said it felt like she got hit by a train, and then the next thing she remembers is waking up and everything that happened afterwards. And for me, the thing that I would look into, well, not look into, but this would be me, because I immediately, when I see things like this, when I was watching it, I thought two things. First, I tried really hard to read the body language, really not miss anything that she was saying, because my first thought is I want to be able to tell if you're telling the truth or not, because sadly that is something that we have to worry about. If someone is lying, exaggerating the truth, from me watching it, it did not seem like she was exaggerating the story. And she had two of her legal counsels there. At the very beginning, they mentioned, you know what, the stuff that she's like, it's really bothering her. She's written it down on this notebook to kind of help her. And her legal counsel was even there to, when the detective would ask her a question and she'd get off the path a little bit, her legal counsel would step right in, answer the question, kind of get her right back on track to make sure that everything was going fine. And to me, the second thing I think about is I put myself into the shoes of a GM, into a coach, into somebody in the war room when it comes draft time. And the thing I think about is, after watching this, because if you are a team that has Joe Mixon on your board who is thinking about taking this guy, I would watch this video just to have it in here, just to use it as what can we take away from it. And the thing I would take away, especially if I was a coach, not only did the action happen, but it's also one of those things, the conversation that was said in front of the store, with everything that's going on in our world today, everything that is going on in the NFL, with everything that started with I'm going to go back to for the NFL with Michael Sam, and kind of starting that progressive movement with him being the first openly gay player to be drafted into the NFL. I would be a coach that I would say, I don't want him on my team. I do not want him in my locker room, because I do not want him, if it's him or if it's, I don't want him being influenced by the wrong people, and I don't want him accidentally saying something like that and causing bad blood in my locker room. That's what I would immediately think of, is I don't want any bad blood in my locker room. I want my guys united because I'm going to need them united if we're going to win a Super Bowl.
So really quickly to go back to a little bit of what had happened in the interview and everything like that. So in the ESPN article, it says, after her account of the incident, Freudiger, so that's the detective on the case and the Norman police detective, told Molitor that her version was in, quote, direct conflict with 10 or 12 written statements that I have about what happened, end quote. Quote, I can tell you 6 people out on that sidewalk at least want me to believe that this all started over cigarette smoke, quote, end quote, he said, and quote, that they were perfect angels about it and very politely tried to correct the situation where they were around some secondhand smoke and none of this other stuff, end quote. Freudiger, however, said that in his opinion, Molitor's, quote, explanation of what happened seemed much more reasonable, end quote.
And that's the thing that I took away from it.
Can I first say, it doesn't necessarily matter that it's his opinion that it seems more reasonable. I mean, in my opinion, it seems reasonable that the Atlanta Falcons should have won Super Bowl 51. Okay. Seems reasonable. They did not win the game. They did not win the game because it was outlandish that the Patriots came back. But it's probably a bad example, but it's the one that I'm trying to give right now. What seems reasonable isn't always what actually happens. And that's what you have to be able to say.
And that's one of the things that popped into my head.
And that's again another human being who, they also, it's easy for human beings who have feelings to get emotionally attached to it, to see, maybe Officer Freudiger has a daughter. Maybe he sees his daughter, in her. And, he, that makes sense. Like, you want to kind of protect them and stick up for them. However, I think that, certainly one thing you cannot forget is that, she may not have been completely in the... She may have not completely been in the clear. If she did indeed say something and say a racial slur, which, quote, almost everyone says that you did not use a racial slur, end quote. She says that she would never. She said that where she's from, there were a lot of black people, and she would never do that. That, however, that's part of the interview. That to me is like a cop out. Oh, my president's black, so I can say it. That's kind of like one of those. But
it's always
Ricky,
like the stand-up comedian does that with the it's fine. I got a black friend kind of a thing.
Yeah, I know. It's like one of those things. So you can't really use that. It doesn't matter in the heat of things. You're inebriated. They're probably inebriated. You say things sometimes that you want to take back. You say things that you want to take back, and could that have been one of those times? Maybe, but. It did seem like she was provoked. These guys did just... It doesn't sound like they were just that she and her friends, Molitor and her friends, were just standing on the corner, trying to smoke into these guys' faces. It sounds like they wanted to stick to themselves, and Joe Mixon and his group of guys went out of their way to try and provoke this group of people with this girl and catcalls and all this stuff, and then it ended ugly.
Well, and to me, and this is what I kind of want to reel the conversation back into, is put yourself in the mind of an NFL executive, or whatever you think of, head coach, GM, owner, somebody that's going to be in that war room for all 3 days of the draft. Because let's be honest, Joe Mixon is not going to hear his name called night 1 of the draft. We can be certain of that. If this incident isn't enough, I don't care how good he is. He's not a first-round talent, let's be honest. But if he wants to hear his name called in day 2, day 3, put yourself into the mind of whatever you want in that war room. Answer this question to yourself. Would you draft Joe Mixon? And to me, I would say no. And it has, to me, at this point, has nothing to do with the actual act of what happened. When we first talked about this, It was all about the act of him actually hitting her. Yes, that's important, but now with this details, to me, I'm looking at it and going, okay, let's analyze this new shit that we got. Let's look at this. If any of this, like, if this is how he's going to conduct himself around his friends, and I know that people are going to say, but he was a stupid kid and you learn from your mistakes. Brandon, it goes back to what you asked me before the podcast when we talked about this. You asked me, have you ever said that? No. Have you done stupid things? Yes. Have you done something that stupid? No. It's one of those things where it comes down to character, it comes down to judgment, it comes down to who are you going to surround yourself with. And in the NFL, that is the biggest key ever. It doesn't matter who you are. If you are the star quarterback or you are the fifth special teamer just clinging on to a roster spot, you have to surround yourself with the right people. Because once you get to the NFL, once you get that NFL paycheck, people are going to want to hang out with you just because you have that status symbol, no matter who you are on the team. And like I said, I made my opinion. Is if I was a coach, because that's who I put myself into, the mind of a coach, I would pass on Joe Mixon completely. It's too much trouble for what he's worth, kind of a thing. I'll go find another running back, especially where he's going to be drafted. I know that people keep throwing out, well, he's a second-round talent. I see him at third round at best. Probably even fourth, fifth. Let's be honest with ourselves. And if I'm looking for a running back in the fourth and fifth round, and he's got this much baggage, fuck it. I don't need it. I'll find a different running back, kind of a thing. You know what running back I would look at? That guy out of San Diego State. That's the guy I'd look at. People are going to pass on him because he's shorter than everyone else. Guess what? Drew Brees and Russell Wilson are also short. That guy doesn't have character issues. I will take Pumphrey over Mixon in the late rounds. And that's kind of my whole thought of it is I think this is detrimental to him. Detrimental because it just stacks on to him not getting invited to the combine. We haven't even mentioned that. I'm looking at
We did.
We did mention it, but we didn't dive into it, is what I'm saying. Is there's a Pro Football Talk article that I'm looking at, and they even mentioned the NFL is making it harder for college players who have been involved in violent incidents off the field to make it up professionally. Like this, Joe Mixon and Ishmael Zamora from, I want to say it's Baylor.
It is Baylor.
For those two people, the NFL is basically saying, we're not helping you. We are not going to help you. You made a mistake. You can come out and help it. We're not going to give you a platform to try to help yourselves because the NFL, and this goes to the combine part of it, the NFL is a brand. They don't want anybody to come in and bring down their brand, put a bad face on their brand, no matter who you are. If you're Tom Brady or you're the last player picked in the 2016 NFL draft.
Well, Ricky, I think that the main thing is the NFL has made a very clear statement here with not inviting him because it's not just that he did something wrong. If the guy just did something wrong, he's still probably going to come. Mm-hmm. But this is clearly egregious in the mind of the NFL because otherwise he'd be going. He would be going to the NFL Combine. He is not. Joe Mixon is a second or third round talent. He will not be taken there because of this. I think that if I'm an executive, okay, let me make another reference here. Draft Day.
Mm-hmm.
You seen the movie? Good movie.
How many people went to that birthday party? Is that what you're going to say? They were talking about his birthday. How many people went to it, Brandon? Did anyone go to the birthday party? And who went to the birthday party? We're on the same wavelength.
And I think I think ultimately it comes down to, do people want to hang out with you? What I'm trying to say ultimately is it's not do people want to hang out with you? Are you hanging out with the right people?
Mm-hmm.
Do people want to hang out with you because you are a good person
mm-hmm.
and you exhibit good character? And I think
Bingo.
that if you do not, that is a problem. And I think going forward, look at Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel, we knew in college, We knew he liked to have fun. We knew he liked to party. We saw pictures. But I don't think anyone knew quite how bad it was, quite how much of a problem it was.
Once that spotlight's on you, even in Cleveland, it's bright.
And I don't think, and it's tough to be bright in Cleveland. I think that, I don't even think that he knew how bad it was going to be or how big of a problem that he had, because he certainly has a problem. I really do think he's trying to fight it. But I think that for Joe Mixon, there's a lot of things that he needs to do right now to try and prove that he is a good guy. And I said it earlier, and I wasn't kidding. You have to go out into the community and show, guess what? I want to help people, not hurt them. I want to build people up, not tear them down. I respect women. I respect men. I respect gays. I respect people of all minority groups, because, and I say gays because that was the situation he was involved in.
Yeah, well, calling the guy.
I think that ultimately he really needs to do a lot of good things, and hopefully some of them can be in the spotlight so that people will see, and hopefully he doesn't do it for show. But Joe Mixon has got to work his way back, and if he doesn't, then he clearly doesn't want it.
Well, and the last thing I want to bring up on my end, and then I'll throw it to you for any last thoughts that you have on it, is the stance by the NFL to say you two aren't invited. Basically, the whole teacher thing of, you know what, if you guys can't behave yourselves, you guys don't get to have snack time with the other kids. That's me bringing it way down to a basic level. But
Ricky wants snack time.
The thing I love about it is it's the NFL taking the stand where, in my mind, it tells college athletes now, getting to the NFL is a privilege, not a right. Just because you are good at something and you are very talented on the field does not mean you are automatically going to be able to play in the NFL. You have to earn it. It is a privilege, not a right. And maybe with the NFL now doing this, maybe it will have a ripple effect for students who are now in college to say, you know what? Let me think about things a little bit when I'm in the moment. Let me think about who I'm hanging out with, because if I want to get to the NFL, I have to make sure I don't get into any situations that may affect it. So that's what I think with this whole not inviting Joe Mixon to the combine. What kind of a ripple effect is that going to have on other college athletes who want to get to the NFL? And like I said, basically saying it's a privilege, not a right to play in the NFL. Before we get to your final thoughts, before we close out the podcast, anything with the Joe Mixon that you want to mention?
You know, I just hope for him, and not even just his NFL career, as I just hope for himself, that everything turns out okay with him, that he's able to kind of move past this, but not necessarily forget it, because I hope that this is something that helps him to strive to be a better person than each and every day, because I think we all have kind of that one thing in our life that we look at and we go, you know what, I want to be a better person, and it's because of this. It's this thing that happened in my life, or these multiple instances, because no one's perfect. We all make mistakes, that's for sure. But I think that, all of them, we can always try and move forward, and we have to.
Well, and Brandon, this is the part of the podcast where I turn it over to you for the Primetime Podcast this week. What are Swanee's final thoughts?
Final thoughts have absolutely nothing to do with sports, but
that's
folks,
always good.
I don't know if you watched the Grammys or not. I did.
I didn't.
I did. Absolutely loved them. Adele, she did a clean sweep at the Grammys. An awesome person, absolutely awesome person. Gave so many props to Beyonce, which I absolutely loved. I thought that was incredible. A lot of people thought Beyonce was snubbed for Album of the Year. I believe it was Album of the Year that they thought that she was snubbed for. And what I have to say to that is, you know what? It's unfortunate. People do get snubbed, though. Teams get snubbed in college football every year. Teams get snubbed in college basketball every year. You come back stronger. Beyonce will come back stronger. It was an absolutely fun Grammys to watch. Interesting, for sure. Very interesting. But props to Adele for just sweeping them away. She got 5 Grammys. Probably almost everyone watching this is probably like, Brandon, what the hell are you talking about? We do sports here. But
hey, now we don't. We got the Rick and
seriously,
Johnny podcast now.
Adele, outstanding job. Check out her music. Hello, Song of the Year.
Yeah, and we do everything now. If you haven't checked out the Rick and Johnny podcast, this is my shameless plug. Go ahead, check it out. New podcast here on MVP. But I want to thank you guys for checking out the Primetime Podcast today. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. Also on Twitter, I'm at Ricky Widmer. Brandon is at Young_Swan19. Most Valuable Podcast is at Most Valuable Pod. Also, if you like what we're doing here and you want to help us out a little bit more other than hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, go ahead and check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Most Valuable Podcast. Thank you for all the patrons who support us on Patreon each and every month. I want to thank you guys, though, for watching and listening. And as always, have a good day, everybody. Well, thank you guys for checking out this video from the Primetime Podcast. If you want to check out more, click right over here. The video's right over here. Check it out. Check it out. Check it out.